Hello, this is John Harrigan, and this is part 2 of the story of my life and the story of how the secret to immortality evolved and came about, and a little bit of what it is. But what the secret to immortality is really my life story. I evolved, so to speak. I grew as a man, and the secret to immortality grew and developed. And in part 1 before this, that you may have seen, talks about at the age of 6, I was looking into a mirror and saw about 1,600 lifetimes, saw them all, experienced them all at the same time in a type of higher power place, God consciousness. And my thinking was, okay, here we go with another lifetime. This lifetime, I want to get it right. I want to discover the secret to life. And I want to be all a human can be. I want to learn, figure out, and see all a human can become. And that's basically what the secret to immortality is and what we teach. At the end of that first video, I talked about in my life, and only in my life, how hardship, pain, and difficulty became really the motivation, the bedrock of what I became, what I learned, what I teach. How hardship, difficulty, and pain turned around and became really gold, really the foundation and strength of who I have been able to become, been fortunate enough to live through and become. And a lot of you are already identifying with my story, parts of it, as your story. Let's get into part 2, video 2 of the life story of the secret to immortality and me. And this is there's a miracle in this story, so stay tuned, but it's a little tough and difficult. The first big and miraculous experience in my life happened at the age of 16, after I had suffered badly, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, after I had suffered badly over the course of about a year and then asked for help when I didn't think I could take it anymore. So again, what this video is about is a big and miraculous event in my life that only happened after absolutely horrible suffering and hardship for a year that led me to the age of 16. As a warning, what's ahead is a bit difficult to hear. It's unpleasant, harsh, and even scary, but has that miracle ending and many miracles that preceded. The story of my life is really this. I had to experience really deep hardship and pain and find a way out of that to get everything I wanted from life, to find out how we were made, how we were put together, and how you can overcome any hardship, pain, and difficulty of your life too, to live a life of joy, happiness, and freedom. So this is when things I'm about to tell you about, when things went really wrong. There's, of course, other difficulties in my life or anybody's life before the age of 15, but this is what happened to me. And this is what brought forth the secret to immortality. I heard about LSD. This was decades ago. I'm in my 60s now. I heard about LSD. There's a lot of talk. Renowned doctors, psychiatrists, professors of psychology at Harvard talking about how great LSD was, and the same thing is kind of starting to happen now, which I find a little troubling, but that's not my aim or my purpose on this planet as I teach you today. But I heard about LSD. This was decades ago, and how it could give you a spiritual experience, taking you perhaps straight to God. And I thought, wow, this is great. I was a spiritual seeker from the get-go, age 6 that I knew of, and I really wanted to accelerate things. In the strange way, this horrible experience gave me everything that I wanted, but it was a tough way to go. As a naive teen, age 15, this LSD sounded like a wonderful idea. I was an ardent seeker, as I've shared and mentioned, from an early age. Before I was born, really, I wanted to spiritually advance and know the secret to life. Consequently, at the age of 15, I took some LSD for the first time, and with a couple friends, and it was nothing remarkable. I could see that it was a neurotoxin. That's what LSD is, and I could see that I had a neurotoxin experience in my brain, and it was somewhat interesting, but I could see, for me at least, LSD drugs and hallucinogens were absolutely not how I was going to describe, how I was going to experience the secret to life. I knew from that LSD experience that I needed to experience me, unadulterated me, the deep self, to get what I wanted and knew. And I knew that drugs weren't going to take me there. However, I found it a somewhat entertaining experience in an otherwise boring summer at the age of 15. So I decided to find and buy some more LSD, and I took a second dose. And it was a very different experience. In the second LSD experience, all hell broke loose, literally. It was a tough experience. I had a bad drug-induced experience. I was later told by a very nice guy in school that the LSD that he sold me had too much strychnine and methamphetamine in it, and everybody was having problems. And he said, did you have a problem, John? I just calmly said yes and didn't care to discuss it. But when I was told that what I took had strychnine and methamphetamine in it, and I've studied this a lot over the years, and a simple hallucinogenic, even marijuana with a really high level of THC, can wreck someone's brain for life. But I was surprised because I didn't expect anything to be in the LSD. I didn't expect the trip, the experience to go wrong in any way. I didn't know how badly a street drug could be made and how wrong it could be, as pretty much everybody knows today. The strychnine alone in what I took almost killed me, and I want to tell you, that's a very painful way to go. But I'm getting ahead of the story. This is what happened on that near-fatal LSD trip, the second one, the bad one. Again, it's a little tough to hear, so be warned, but there's a good, miraculous ending. Many good and miraculous things evolved from this tough and difficult experience, so stay tuned if you can. That second LSD trip at the age of 15 quickly went wrong, horribly and terribly wrong. In a car waiting for a friend, I was just sitting there, and slowly the car caught fire, and I was paralyzed and I couldn't move. Without warning, the car just caught fire, and I was trapped in the car. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. I was paralyzed in fear as I slowly burned to the bone. And I experienced everything, and perhaps the pain of the strychnine was kicking in and the methamphetamine. I experienced everything, and it was an agonizing, painful experience, just watching my body burn away to the bone until there was absolutely nothing left of me. It was except a skeleton, basically. It was a painful experience, obviously, yet the fear and the terror of it hurt the most. I didn't know that fear and terror could be so intensely painful. That's really what hurt the most. It was like a bad dream, of course, but fully alive, or you felt every inch of it, the strychnine and methamphetamine kicking in with the LSD. Neurotoxin. And I want to emphasize again and again that LSD is a very, very powerful neurotoxin. A lot like strychnine, actually. As this time in the car continued, this blazing and horrible auto experience, as this time in the car continued, thankfully it eventually wound down and things turned to normal. And I wasn't okay. I'm laughing a bit now because I'm well out of it. It's decades later, but I wasn't laughing at the time. That horrible experience slowly wound down, and my body reassembled, everything got back, and I was so relieved. My friend came back to the car and we headed home. I was deeply relieved, as you might imagine, thinking that the worst was over, swearing to never take any drug on earth again. Oh, but about the worst being over, I was so wrong. The worst was yet to come. So the fire in the car stopped. My body came back. My friend returned to the car, and everything was normal. I was relieved and grateful to be alive. So my friend went home. He lived a block away. I got out of the car, and I decided to take a shortcut on foot through the middle of the block. So through the middle of that block, as I got into that block, the middle, into somebody's backyard, things quickly went off track. I'd walked up somebody's driveway into the backyard, and I became very confused. It was hard to see things again. The trip was kicking in. And what happened is I got stuck. In reality, I got stuck in a large row of rose bushes. But remember, I was on the strychnine and LSD, so I was stuck in those rose bushes. They were hurting and tearing. I was moving, trying to get away. I couldn't see things well. With every move, I got more and more entangled in those rose bushes with strychnine, methamphetamine, and LSD racking my brain and entire body, really. Those rose bushes that were digging into my flesh came alive and just wrapped around my body, pulling tight as if I was in a wild, dark, Disney-esque animation. And sadly, all of it seemed real to me. And I could feel all the pain and the ripping of those rose bush rose bush thorns. Say that 3 times. I could feel it as if the thorns were made of steel and 10 times bigger and sharper than they were. But that rose bush came alive, as in a crazy Disney movie, as a raging, many-tentacled beast. That rose bush came alive, wanting to kill and rip me apart. The bushes, the tentacles of that rose bush wrapped around me, holding firm, digging in, twisting, turning, whirling, and ripping. And anything you're imagining that's horrible was happening. It was agony. I could feel the pain of it. And those arms of the rose bush wrapped around, pulled me apart, and took me to the ground. And again, the pain was one thing, but the terror and the fear of it all was the most painful thing of all. And remember, I'm going to pause here. Remember, I'm here today and everything's all right. And remember, everything turned out well, and this troubled experience led to many miracles and eventually a wonderful life where I'm before you teaching the secret to immortality. So just pause with yourself. Pause with you, and I'll pause too. Remember, this is all about something good. So I was pulled to the ground in a lot of pain and terror by this crazy Disney-esque rose bush. And in a crosswise manner, with every tentacle around me, this is the tough stuff again, the rose bush tightened further, tearing my flesh to pieces. And I could feel it all, every bit, every rip of my skin and tear, and it was painful, let me tell you. The only thing greater than that physical pain that I've mentioned was the escalating fear, perhaps the anger of those silent killing bushes angrily pulling me apart. I want you to pause again, because there's one more episode of hard stuff. A few more, really. But this is all towards something good. So for a minute, think of the difficulties and pains of your life. And don't go into bad memories, but understand with the secret to immortality that those bad and terrible memories that you may not even want to think about, those can be turned around to something strong, good, everlasting, joyous, happy, and free. So while I'm sharing the hardship of my life, understand this difficult story became the solid foundation. How I responded to this hardship became the solid foundation of everything I'm teaching you, of a strong, good, and happy life. Keep that in mind, because there's a little more hardship to go here. On the ground, unable to move, again, I was wrapped by the rose bush tentacles, held tight in thorny restraint, and it hurt. Again, those rosebush arms began to grind and pull around me, twisting, turning, and ripping me apart. I could feel every tear of my skin, and it was a difficult experience. The fear of it all was rushing wild within me, and that fear almost killed me, really, as my heart started beating faster and faster. In time, though, the rosebush let up and released me. I was bleeding, most of my flesh torn apart, my muscles exposed. In time, the rosebush let up and released me. I was bleeding, most of my flesh gone and torn apart, my muscles exposed. For a moment, there was quiet, dead silence. The most silent moment maybe I had ever experienced. Alone and relieved, I felt the worst was over, but I was wrong. In that instant of relief, the next round of terror began. Oh yeah, there's a next round and then another after that. With muscles exposed in a bloody heap, a group of bats descended upon me, ravenous. It was horrifying and it was painful. In a fury of hunger and greed, the bats began to further rip me apart and feed. They were hungry, these little bats. Hold on to your seat if you're still with me. There was one final act. So I'm on the ground, I can't move, the flesh is all gone, and the bats are ripping and tearing what remains, the muscles and internal organs, apart. And they were hungry, these little bats. The bats, though, finished, fully fed, and flew away, their wings flapping noisily in the dark sky. And that sound of bats flapping was to terrorize me and to trigger me into PTSD events for years to come. But at that moment, the bats left me. The bats left. I had again a brief moment of pause. I took a breath, relieved. And I want to pause again. If you're listening to this story, some of you aren't bothered at all, and that's great. That's what I want. Just so you know and understand that a hardship, difficulty, and pain can lead you to the strongest foundation of life, of joy and happiness and freedom, if you learn how to work through it with the help of someone or some other people. So I'm sharing this story of hardship and difficulty for a reason. So you understand that perhaps the worst things that can happen to people in life, and other things, difficult things happen to me that I'm not sharing in this specific story, but the worst things can become the bedrock of your strength, of your joy, of your happiness and freedom. So I'm down on the ground, the bats have been feeding, they flew away, and once again I had that wonderful moment of pause. I took a deep breath, relieved in that almost infinite moment of quiet. But at the very second that I felt that relief, a swarming body of insects and worms shot up through the ground, wriggled up through the earth, a swarming body of insects and worms, and literally the worst possible nightmare that anyone could ever dream up. They shot up through the ground, and there was a little bit of flesh left in my body around the bones, and these insects and these worms ravenously again, always ravenously, started feeding on the little that remained of me. And as this happened, and we're getting to something good, as this happened, the pain of it all, and especially the deep grinding fear, overwhelmed me. My heart was exploding. It was beating so fast I could feel it, like a higher power self of me started observing this wildly beating heart, my whole body in a state of extraordinary panic, stress, emergency. And I thought, with my heart beating fast, with my body way overstressed, this higher power part of me, this God-conscious being of me that was inside my body, living my life of me, I, as this a higher, greater person, started to think, this lifetime is over, this life is over. So with that stress really actually killing me, I began to slowly leave my body. But again, not as my earthly personality at age 15, but a much larger, older soul that had lived those 1,600 lives. And this soul was very experienced in the process of dying, having done it so many times. And I, as that greater soul, just said to myself, I guess this lifetime is over, and I started to leave my body. But when I started to leave my body, I left as this greater soul, and this soul of me was in no way affected, hurt, or touched by the bad experience. It was in a way just a learning thing. This greater soul of me that was leaving my body was quiet, relaxed, calm, and at peace. No hardships of my life in any way affected this soul, yet the soul experienced everything. This deep soul within my body, living this young life, was the greater soul of me, a timeless person that had lived countless lifetimes. And I want to emphasize a timeless soul that had lived countless lifetimes, started to leave my body. So this was the first real conscious experience of being a timeless, infinite soul that had been just living this one painful life. And the pain and the hardship, my body had simply experienced too much. And indeed, I was dying from it all. The stress, the strain, the pain, and probably a lot of it, the strychnine. Leaving my body, I was calm, at peace, and not a part of the pain, of any pain really, of my lifetime. Not a part of this difficult experience. The soul of me, the all of me, that had no pain or injury from this life was leaving my body. As I began to leave my body, the greater part of me I said to myself, quote, I guess this lifetime is over, quote. And I remember saying this at that age. It was a dispassionate observation of someone who had lived 1,600 lifetimes or more, or maybe a bit less. There was no regret that I was dying. There was no stress or strain. Just an observation. I guess this lifetime is over. But the instant, I'm still here, so remember that, but the instant that I thought my life was over and the instant I was this higher self leaving my body, I went unconscious. And in this unconscious state, it was kind of difficult to know how much time passed, but I felt maybe about 2.5 hours. I slowly awakened. After, I was in this horrifying experience, rosebush tentacles tearing me apart, bats, insects, worms, yuck. I don't like thinking about it now too much, but it's good to think about it. The more I share the story, the more I talk about it, the story fades away and it doesn't have such a physical memory part. So I was leaving my body. It appeared that I was dying. The instant I had that experience of leaving my body, I went unconscious for about 2.5 hours, and I woke up in a nearby beautiful open backyard. I woke up in the middle of their lawn, this big beautiful lawn, knowing that a miracle had happened. I had been transported from being really entrapped in thorn bushes to lying back down on a beautiful backyard of grass. In this unconscious state, maybe 2.5 hours as I've shared, I slowly awakened. I awakened slowly knowing that a miracle had happened. Can you imagine being tied up in that crazy wild trip, crazy difficult experience, and to awaken completely out of it in a backyard nearby, maybe 35 feet away, I don't know. But when I awakened, I was calm in this backyard. I knew a miracle had happened. Somehow I was transported from the terror of those rose bushes. Somehow I was transported about 35 feet, laid on my back for maybe 2.5 hours. I awakened knowing a miracle had happened. I was calm. The drug-induced terror had stopped. And while unconscious, again, I had somehow been transported. To me, this was quite a miracle. What transported me and how, I don't know. But I was transported. I was made unconscious. I was transported to the safety of a wide open, beautiful backyard about 35 feet away from the rose bush thicket where I had been trapped. Awakening in this backyard, I was calm, relaxed, at peace. There was no more pain or fear. This was more a miracle at the time than I could have hoped for or really even imagined. Just on my back, slowly waking up, I basked in the quiet and peace of the moment. I was so grateful. I looked up at a bright moon shining upon me. I was warm. It felt warm. The moon looked beautiful. I had been saved. It was a wonderful, delightful, special moment. After some time, just waking up, just recovering a bit, I pulled myself up and began to walk home, my house nearby. I got to my house, my parents' house, and slowly sneaked back into the house, into my parents' home, making my way to my bedroom. Everything was good. Everything was fine. I got into my bed with great relief. I couldn't really sleep for a few hours, but I just laid in my bed, relaxing, calm, at peace for maybe a couple hours, just appreciating the miracle that had just happened, feeling safe. I was grateful. A reprieve had been given me. As the day came alive, I left my bedroom to go to my summertime teenage job at a gas station. We had a long stairway in the house from the second floor to the first. At the halfway point of the stairway was a landing, and at that landing there were two large French doors. On most summer days, as this summer days, they were wide open, revealing a lush backyard full of nature. As I got to that landing, on my way down the stairs, I could hear the roar of crickets. I could hear the roar of crickets chirping and morning birds singing. As nice as this may sound, I was instantly triggered back into the terror of that LSD experience the night before. Back in the strong fear as this trigger happened, back in the strong fear, I could feel my entire nervous system from head to toe was badly injured, as well as my brain. With this terror suddenly returned, my nerves in horrible pain, and I could feel how they had been damaged. The words, quote, "I'm fucked for life," end quote, came tumbling out of my mouth. Sadly, I was fully correct in this quote. Sadly and painfully so. I had been really badly injured by that experience. Though alive and on my way to work, I had been very badly injured. My nervous system, my brain. I had PTSD. Almost anything would trigger me back to the experience, or I simply was terrified that something was going to trigger me back, as it inevitably would. So I had to cope with that hardship and pain, and out of this difficulty, this new and constant difficulty, an even greater miracle came that really became the foundation, of the secret to immortality. Out of this hardship that I've just described, this PTSD, discomfort and pain, out of this slowly came the miracle of the secret to immortality. Out of this came a miracle in my own life I'm going to share later in these videos. Stay tuned. As I'm telling you right now, if it's been too much, stay tuned. The great miracle is to come, what I call the great miracle that transformed everything and showed me exactly what my life work was to be, how the secret to immortality was going to come forth. I'm going to tell you all about it. But I was in a tough situation. I was on my way to work. I could feel my nervous system hurt, injured, and in pain. I could feel that the night before had wounded me, injured me. So I stumbled through a year of this incredible condition, of this incredibly painful and difficult condition. I strumbled, and I tumbled, and I struggled through a year of this painful condition. I tried to tell people about it, but no one really understood me, and I just learned that I couldn't so much. As I said, if I was not being triggered back into this terrifying event by anything, just hearing a normal bird flap its wings, or even seeing a normal bird, I was triggered back to visioning the bats tearing apart my body. I was either being triggered back to the experience, or I was afraid that I would be triggered back. This is a very extreme example of everybody's lifetime. We all go through hardship and pain, and we try to live through it. And what the Secret to Immortality will show you how to do is how to turn that pain around into strength, into a foundation for joy, happiness, and freedom. But I was struggling with the pain of my life, the big, big difficulty of my life. Smells and sounds of every type at that age could instantly, the age of 15, with all that damage, could instantly flash me back to that bad experience, the overwhelming fear and pain of it. And I'm feeling a little bit of it right now, kind of remembering, smelling a little bit of it right now, but just a wee tiny part. It's still a part of my life, and that's a good thing, and I'll talk about that later. But most of it has been processed down to a very, very low level, and all of this hardship created the secret to immortality that I'll later talk about. This constant fear of my new condition at the age of 15 was simply agonizing. I had, of course, PTSD. People didn't really know what that was back then, and I had a very bad case of it. After a year, and I'm getting to something really good, so stay tuned, I'm going to tell you how hardship and pain can lead to something wonderful. It led to the secret to immortality, a life of joy, happiness, and goodness that I share and teach to you this very day. After a year of this 15-year-old torment, I found myself in bed one night, knowing that I could not endure another moment, and this is the big-time miracle. I knew I couldn't endure another moment. I had reached the proverbial end of the road. Nothing could save me, nothing could help me. I was on my own in bed, but I had gotten to the point where I was exhausted as a human being. I knew there was nothing left in the world that I understood that could change this pain and hardship. I had been to some doctors. They didn't know what to do, sadly. I had told my mother about it. She didn't know what to do, except take me to doctors that didn't know what to do at the time. Today they would have understood and easily treated me, but the reality is, I guess I needed that pain and struggle, as you'll find out, to give birth to the secret to immortality, to connect to a greater power that had that secret. The pain and difficulty of this 15-year-old situation had progressed for about a year, and I simply could not further endure it. It was like sitting on hot coals all day and night, literally, screaming bloody murder and agony and pain. I was at a juncture, an important juncture of life and death, deciding, trying to figure out, can I live or should I end my life? At this instant of decision, should I live, should I die? I cannot live another minute. So at this instant that I was aware of this, I can't live another minute of this. It really wasn't like I'm fed up. It was like I realized that my physical resources couldn't take me on another second. It wasn't just not enduring the pain of it. I knew that physically I couldn't endure the stress of the PTSD and pain. At this instant of awareness and decision, a prayer rolled out of me from a far greater depth than I knew existed. The simple prayer that I said was this: God, do something or I'm cashing in my chips. I wasn't angry. I wasn't reacting at anything. It was just a desperate prayer that kind of came out of me without thinking. It was the desperation and the wanting something to save my life. And this, I didn't think about the prayer. All of a sudden I just said, God, do something or I'm cashing in my chips. Now, I don't suggest this to anyone, and I don't want anyone to suffer, and that's what the secret to immortality was about. But this prayer came tumbling out of me. Perhaps I could have taken my own life. I don't know, but that's not what happened. Instead, a prayer came tumbling out from the depth of my soul and was uttered through these lips. I was saved. I was saved by a big, fantastic miracle. And the story of that is in the next video, part 3. I'll see you there.